Hi everyone! Welcome to today's video about Cooncepts. Cooncepts is a vector-based drawing app available in iOS and Android. All of my quilts, including the two that you see next to and behind me right now, start as drawings in Cooncepts, and I use this app over any other drawing app because it's vector-based. Working in vector right from the start of my design process gives me the most editing capability, which is crucial for moving on to make my templates in Illustrator and later having my designs cut by a cutting machine. So in today's video, I'm going to take you through the whats, the whys, and the hows of the specific features I use in Cooncepts when drawing my quilt designs. This is not going to be an exhaustive demonstration of Cooncepts features, but rather a demonstration of how to use Cooncepts to make freehand drawings with the intention of doing further editing in Illustrator or any other vector software, and ultimately turning our drawings into quilts. I'll put a link to Cooncepts online documentation down in the description to this video, and that's where you should refer if you have a question about Cooncepts' other settings and functionality that we're not going to be talking about today. As I'm sure you can tell by the length of this video, we're going to cover a ton of information. I've broken it into chapters, which you can see on the progress bar. That should make it easier for you to skip to a section you're most interested in, or to refer back at a later date. This video is a crash course class unto itself, but it's also the first lesson in a 6-part series on designing a quilt with the intention of cutting its fabric on a cutting machine, such as a Cricut, which is what I myself use, or a Silhouette Cameo, or Brother Scan and Cut, or any other cutting machine that uses a drag blade. This first video is free, but the rest of the class and the accompanying live stream events, where I will stream myself doing the process that month's video is teaching, when viewers are able to ask me questions through a chat, those videos and live streams will only be available through my Patreon. If you like this video or want to participate in the upcoming live streams, please consider becoming a patron to help me make more content like this in the future. Thank you. And one final thing, I'm providing the fully editable file that you're going to see me drawing in this video as a free download for you to open in your own Cooncepts app. I didn't have a way to upload that file to YouTube, so I've instead attached it to the public post on my Patreon page. So check the description for that link if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching it on Patreon, then it's attached to this blog post. To this Patreon post. Okay, that's enough introduction. Let's get started. Okay, welcome to Cooncepts. What you're looking at on your screen right now is Cooncepts on my iPad. The view on the left is a direct feed from my iPad. That is my iPad screen. To the right of my iPad screen is the GoPro, which is a separate camera, and it's currently aimed down at my iPad. The reason I have these two views is because I want to be able to show you what I'm doing with gestures and my Apple Pencil, so you can more clearly see what I'm tapping on. But the feed from the iPad screen directly on the right is going to be a lot clearer. So this way, you'll be able to see in clear detail what is happening on screen, but also be able to see what I'm doing with my pencil and with any gestures that I use while drawing today's session. And then, of course, I'm down here in the corner, so you get to watch me and while I'm talking to you in today's video. So that's exciting. Okay, so as I said, we're looking at Cooncepts right now. I've been using Cooncepts for years, and so I have quite the history of quite the number of files that are saved in my app because I've been using it for years. If you've downloaded and installed Cooncepts for the first time, you won't have any of these projects already loaded. You'll just have a blank screen, but otherwise your view should be pretty much the same. Now, before we dive into today, Cooncepts is free to install. It's free to download and install, but a lot of the stuff I'm going to be demonstrating today has to be opened by purchasing the in-app Essentials pack. So let me show you what that is real quick. To get to the Pro Store, which is the Cooncepts Pro Store, you want to tap this icon up here in the top right. It looks like a little person in a circle. So if you tap that, you'll see your account tab. And down at the bottom, it says purchases. So we'll go to Pro Shop. And then this is the Pro Shop where you can make your in-app purchases. The subscription comes up by default, but you do not need to subscribe for anything that I'm going to demonstrate today. What you do need to purchase is go to one-time purchases, and you want the very top option, which is the Essentials Pack. And as you can see, I've already purchased mine. This is a one-time purchase of $9.99, so essentially $10. And purchasing this Essentials Pack is going to unlock all of the advanced editing features that you're definitely going to want to use. And as I said, I will be demonstrating some of those in today's video. So that's where you go to get the Essentials Pack. Let's close out of this. Okay, so before we can start drawing, we need to make a new file. And the way you have two options, two different ways you can make a new file. The first way is the quickest way, and that is to tap this circle at the bottom of the screen. And I realize my own video is covering things up a little bit. So it's this circle that I'm circling with my pencil. I haven't touched the screen yet. I'm just waving my pencil in the air. But it's this circle down at the bottom. It has a circle with a plus in it. You could tap that to make a new file, or option number 2 is to tap the circle with a plus in it in the top left corner. And that's what I'm going to do right now because I want to point out this import option. So this option that says import is what you will need to tap on if you're opening the file that I'm going to provide for free. So if you've downloaded the concept file that is going to be attached to my Patreon post, it's the demo file that I'm going to be drawing today. If you've downloaded that and want to open it in your own Cooncepts app, you'll need to tap that import button. And then you'll go to a browser in your iPad or on your Android device, and you can navigate to wherever you've downloaded that file, at which point you can open it. But for today, because that file does not yet exist, I have not yet started drawing it, we need to make a new drawing. And so I'm going to tap on this top option that says new drawing. All right, here we are in the new drawing. Now we're going to get all of the boring stuff out of the way first because this is still very important stuff. I want to talk to you about my settings and my presets so that you know what you're looking at when you open up my file. And there is a rhyme and a reason to why I have things set up a certain way in Cooncepts. So we're going to go through the boring stuff first, and then I promise we will get to the drawing. So boring stuff first, let's talk about settings and presets. In the top left corner, I've got my tool wheel. This is this circle up at or it's actually 3 concentric circles up at the top. Along the outside are 8 presets. You will be able to change these on your own, but I currently have them set up for my preferred tools. So you get 8 slots where you can, have tools loaded in for easy selection, and then you have an undo and a redo over here on the side. You can also undo and redo with a 2-finger tap for undo or 3-finger tap for redo, and I use that gesture quite often. But let's start with the tools that I've got up here. So the first one is a pencil, and that's the type of brush that it is. So if I select my brush or the pencil tool and draw on the screen, you can see it looks like a pencil. And I'm going to zoom in by pinching out. So like start with my 2 fingers together and pinch outward, and that's going to zoom in. So if I do that, you can see that this line has a texture. It kind of looks like a pencil drawn on paper, hence the name pencil. And to zoom out, I'm going to do like a reverse pinch. I'm going to start with my fingers apart and then pinch them together, and that will zoom the screen out. So the reason I have pencil as one of my quick selection tools up there is because I use the pencil for quick sketches. If I want to just practice drawing, or I have an idea that's not completely fleshed out in my head and I just want to kind of work it out on paper, I use the pencil because it's scratchy lines and I know that they're not permanent. They're sketchy lines. So that's the point of the pencil. While I have the pencil up, I want to talk about these 3 options in the gray center circle. And I've actually just touched on the first one. This is opacity, which I leave all of my stuff set to 100%. I don't really ever mess with opacity of my drawing tools. So, but that's the first one. The next one is smoothness, which is how much the app will compensate to make your lines smoother as you draw them. So for pencil, I leave it at 0 because, again, this is just for sketchy lines. They're not going to be permanent. They're not finished lines. They're just for me to get my thoughts down on paper. So I don't have the app do any smoothness to those lines. And then the top option here is size. And this circle, the semicircle that goes around the upper corner that I'm gesturing to with my pencil, that indicates the size of the line. So you can make it really big or you can make it really super small. And I had mine set to that setting. So I'll just leave that there for now. Next tool that we've got is, oh, and I'm sorry, this is the color in the center. So if you want to change the color of what you're using, you can tap in the middle there and it will bring up the color wheel and you can pick a new color. Okay, the next hot swap tool that I've got is the slice tool. Now the slice tool is useful because it removes lines. It physically takes them off of your canvas. How that works is if you put your pencil on the screen, you see how there's a little circle moving around on the left under where my pencil, my Apple Pencil is. If I move this circle over the pink line, now do you see how it's cutting? It's just removing it or cutting it apart. That's what the slice tool does. It's physically removing line that I had drawn. So I'm going to 2-finger tap to undo. Okay, now the slice tool is not to be confused by the eraser. So if you want to change tools on your own, just single tap on the tool and it will bring up your brush menu. As you can see, I've currently got slice selected. But there's the mask tool, which I called it the eraser. It used to be called the eraser. Now they're calling it the mask tool. The mask tool just covers up a line. So let's grab the hard mask tool and we'll demo it here. So if I have the hard mask tool selected now, I'm touching the screen and I'm gonna just brush over my pencil line here. Okay, so it looks like it's gone, right? Not so fast. If I select it, you can see that it still exists. The line is still there, and now this white scribble is the mask that I had created to just kind of cover up or to mask the fact that the pencil line went through there. That is not what we want. If we're going to remove line, we don't want, the problem is that if we used the mask tool, because it still exists, because the pink line is still there, both of those lines are going to be there when we go to Adobe Illustrator. And if the objective was to remove the pink line and not just cover it up, we haven't done that. So we're making our lives more difficult when we move on to editing in Adobe Illustrator later on. That's why I use the slice tool, because the slice tool, let me switch back over to the slice tool and I'll demonstrate what it does. So I'm gonna put a big old slice right through here. So now if I do some selection, you can see that pink line stops. The pink line is no longer connected. It is physically separated. So the slice tool removes line, and if that's what we want when moving on to Illustrator to make our editing lives a little bit easier. So I'm going to 2-finger tap and undo a bunch of that stuff that I just did. So I'm just undoing a whole bunch. All right, one more. There we go. So we're back to our pencil line. Let's see, we've talked about the pencil, we've talked about the slice tool. Now let's talk about the pen. And I actually have the pen up here twice, the one that I currently have selected and then this pink one here that I'm pointing at with the pencil. I have the pen tool up here twice. Reason is this first pen tool has its smoothness set to 100 right here. The reason the smoothness is set to 100 is because it makes it very easy to draw perfectly straight lines. Okay? So if the smoothness is set all the way to 100, no matter what you do with your pencil, you're always going to end up with a straight line. So that's just a personal preference. If I need a straight line, I don't want to have to mess with any settings. I just want to be able to quick grab the pen tool and draw a straight line. The other pen tool I have is for making my finished lines. This is the tool that I use to make my final lines that are then exported for later editing in Illustrator. The reason I use the pen tool and not any of the other brush options that are available, because you can see basics. There's the pen, the fountain pen, dynamic pen, fixed width, wire. There are all these other tools, all these other brushes that are available. I use the pen. Reason being, I like the cleanness of the line and the way the pen looks, like the scratchiness of the pencil. That is the pencil line won't look like that when we go to Illustrator. Illustrator is only going to take the fact that there is a line. It's not going to copy how the line looks. I know that's a tough concept without more drawing or without more demonstration, but the getting to Illustrator is something we're going to do next month. So I don't want to overly complicate it right now, but Illustrator is going to know that there is a line, but it's just going to make it a solid, basic line. So drawing with like the watercolor brush or the marker brush, that's not going to matter later on because it won't look like that when we go to Illustrator. So I keep it simple. I just use the pen, and that way I have a nice clean line, and it doesn't change too much visually when we go to Illustrator because there's already not a lot to it. It's just a basic line. Back to the tool wheel. The next three tools all have the same icon, and they are the nudge tool. And I have them on here 3 times because I have them set to 3 different sizes. So if I tap on the size of the first one, you'll see that it's pretty fat. It's this curvature that goes around the upper corners indicating how big it is. The next one, if I tap on size, so this one's a little bit smaller. It's about half the size of that first one. And then my third nudge tool is very thin. So the reason I've got these 3 is because I don't want to, for quick adjustments, I don't want to have to change the size. And the size of the nudge tool determines how much of the line gets edited. So to demonstrate, let me grab the biggest nudge tool, and you can use the nudge tool in 2 ways. You can either tap and grab a line, 2-finger tap to undo, or you can press on your screen and end up with a circle, and then you can push the line into place, or however you want it to be. So when I have the biggest nudge that I have, it's not as big as the nudge could possibly be, but it's my biggest nudge preset. Look at how much of the line is moving. So we're moving the line all the way down to the edge of the next 2 curves. If I grab the smallest nudge tool, look what happens now. I'm only moving the top of that curve. So I use these nudge tools depending on how much line I want to be moving at any given time. And it's quick for me to just go and grab another size instead of having to adjust the one tool. So that's almost everything. The last quick selection that I've got on my tool wheel here is this arrow tool, and it is the selection tool. So if you have the arrow tool selected, you can drag and select an object. And objects that are selected will retain their color. Everything else that's not selected goes gray. That makes it easy for you to see what you have selected. I currently have it set to lasso. So let me point out these extra options that showed up down at the bottom of the screen. Move that to the side a little bit. There we go. I have it set to lasso, but it does also offer an item picker mode, which means if you tap on the screen, instead of drawing a big blue selection area, I get this little crosshairs. And then if I highlight over an object, it indicates what object I'm going to select. So Funny enough, I can't select photographs that I've imported with the lasso tool. I don't know what it is. I can't, but it just doesn't, I just can't do it. I think it's possible, but I just really struggle with selecting photographs with the lasso tool. So I instead change it to item picker for selecting photos. But for everything else, I pretty much leave it on lasso. These pretty much I leave always the same, partial on and ignore, but active, this one's important. Active refers to the layer. So if I were drawing on multiple layers, almost always, I'm going to say 99% of the time, I only want to be modifying what's on my current layer. I don't want to change anything that's on another layer. I probably started drawing on a new layer for that exact purpose, so I wouldn't change anything else. So I leave this to active almost all of the time. It's very rare if I will change this to all. And this change means that when it's set to all, it means the lasso or your selection tool is going to search all layers. So if you draw whatever you draw over on any, regardless of what layer it's on, it's going to be selected and then editable. If you change this to active, this tool will only be able to pick up items that are on your active layer. That's typically how I want things to work. Okay, so that's the tools. Those are my tool presets up there. Next up, we've got, let me grab a color here. We've got the pink and the blue under the tool wheel. These are your palettes, and you can edit palettes by going into the brush menu, and then up at the top, there's a colors tab. So here's where you can use a preset palette or make your own. The one that I have active right now are most used colors. They're like the colors that I've used most in this current drawing. So if I were to start drawing with another color, it would add it to this palette. I prefer this one because it doesn't really matter to me what colors I'm using. And if I want to, it's nice to be able to go and pick them up again quickly. So that's the palette that works for me. If you're opening this file, that's the palette that's probably going to be up there. Okay, next up we've got precision. And the precision is actually just like a folder. If you tap it and it closes, we'll lose all the items underneath it that are part of the precision settings. So I'm going to leave it open for right now. The first setting is the grid. And my grid, you can see on the background here, or I'll zoom in, it's set to a 1-to-1, which means each big rectangle, or I'm sorry, each big square, which I'm loosely going to outline right there, that's 1 inch in size. So having the grid makes it easy to tell how big my drawing is going to get because I'm drawing it 1-to-1, at literally 1-to-1, 1-to-1 scale. I like to draw at 100% size. So even though this tablet, this iPad Pro, is the 12.9-inch model, meaning it's about 12.9 inches on the diagonal screen, I want my drawing to be drawn at 1-to-1 scale at 100% size so that when I export my drawing from Cooncepts and go into Adobe Illustrator, my drawing will be the size that it's going to be as the finished quilt. I don't like dealing with scaling because it gets too confusing. So the grid's helpful for me to know that I'm drawing at 1-to-1. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to draw your stuff at 1-to-1, that's fine. You can either change the scale of the grid. It's set at 1-to-1 by default, but you can change the scale and change the units if you're not in the US and not using the imperial system, or just turn it off and ignore it. That's up to you. I'm just telling you what I like to do, what makes the best sense for me. So that's the grid. Next up is snap. I leave snap off if I'm using the pencil because I don't want my lines to like auto join or snap together or snap to grid. But when I'm drawing with the pen and making good finished lines that are going to export to Illustrator, I leave snap on with certain settings. So if you tap options next to snap, that will open up the extra options. For drawing with the pen tool, snap to grid stays off and align to grid stays off. And then in editing, I always leave snap to grid off. I don't want my lines to snap to the grid. I don't care if they line up with the grid or not. What I do care about is the autocomplete and the key points. I want both of those two to remain on, as well as active layer only for both. I only want my lines to pay attention to what else is on their layer. But autocomplete and key points is very important, and I'm going to demonstrate those for you right now. So let's do a quick line with the pen tool. So I've just got this little semicircle here. Autocomplete means that the endpoints of the line, when you draw, are going to try and connect. Okay, so if snap's turned off, this is what it would look like. Absolutely no change. The lines stayed separate. If snap is turned on, and I go to complete, the new Apple Pencil lets you tap the side of the pencil and it pulls up the colors. So if you see colors randomly, the color wheel randomly pop up, it's because I've bumped my Apple Pencil. Okay, back to snap and the autocomplete. So I've turned snap on, autocomplete is turned on. Look at what happens to the endpoints. I'm going to start drawing. Nope, I wasn't quite close enough. Hang on. Start drawing, and it completed. I didn't actually touch the endpoint of the existing line, but the computer completed that for me. And same thing's going to happen up here. It's snapping the end of the new point to the end of the existing point. This is super important for Illustrator. This is really, really handy. And I made a lot of work for myself before I realized that this was an option. So what's happening in Illustrator? Let me switch to pink for this. So I've drawn a line, and the way, when I say draw a line, Illustrator calls lines paths. So Illustrator says that there's this path here, okay, and it's blue, but it has this path, and along this path are what it calls nodes, and nodes they're anchors. They force the path to fit this line. They keep it in check. Okay, so there's these little anchors along the path in vector art. Now, what is happening with the autocomplete? We have a node, and then we have a path, and then we have another node. And the autocomplete is taking the node at the end of our new drawing, and it's forcing it to line up. This is hard to do. Hang on. It's forcing it to line up with the other node so that the nodes aren't connected, but they're on top of each other. The endpoints are physically located in the exact same position. This matters for Illustrator because when we go to add color in next month's video, if we have a gap, if we have two lines that are drawn with a gap, we won't be able to add color in there. But because we're using autocomplete, there's no gap. So all of the lines we draw, or most of them, the vast majority of the lines that we're going to draw today, they're going to, like, the endpoints are going to be on top of each other. So even though they're not physically connected, that's not going to matter for Illustrator. We're still going to be able to add color into that area. And if we weren't using the snap feature to auto connect endpoints, we would have to go and manually move all of our lines to have those endpoints connected. So this is a very, very, very important time-saving setting that is available, and you should absolutely keep turned on. All right, so that's it on snap. Oh, I didn't mention what the other one was, the key points. You kind of saw that when I was editing just now. But if I grab, let's say I grab the key points are the edges, the circles in the corner of your selection. So you can see it's snapped the arrow to the end of the point. So when I'm editing, I want those snaps to happen. It makes it a little easier for me to line stuff up. But the big one is the autocomplete. So this is when you're drawing your good lines, your finished lines that you're going to take to Illustrator. These are the settings that you want in the snap. Okay, let's move on to measure. I don't use measure too often. What it does is it gives you a measurement of how long a line is. I use measure only if I'm drawing a border. So as I said, I like to draw my artwork at a 1-to-1 ratio. So I typically always know what dimension my artwork is supposed to be ahead of time, usually because I want it to fit into a upcoming show. So I will use the next precision tool that we're going to see right here, the guide, to make a border. And I do use the measure. I turn on measure when I'm making my guide, my border, because I want to know how big it is without having to count squares. So what you just saw me do over here is turn on the guide, and that makes this square in the middle. You can tap to open up. They have guides for all of these different shapes or a straight line. I pretty much only ever use the rectangle because, again, I just use it to set the border of my artwork. So I'm going to make this, and you can pinch, I'm going to pinch out and enlarge this square. I'm going to draw today's drawing at 12 by 12. So let's set this up. Let's set this here. And then if I don't want to pinch to move the entire thing, I can tap in the circle and just reduce the size. And we can go this direction. I'm going to come down this way. Okay. So it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. My border doesn't need to be exactly perfect. As long as I'm, within a few hundredths of an inch, that's good enough. And then, so this right now is just my guide. I haven't actually drawn the border yet. To draw the border, you just tap anywhere on the line or even just on the screen, and it's going to start drawing. So you can see I'm not trying to be anywhere close to the actually tracing what's on the screen. It's forcing me to draw according to the guide, and then it gives me the perimeter. So for just over 4 feet, which makes sense because I have 4 sides that are just a slightly over 12 inches each. So now I know I have my correct size square drawn. I can turn off guide. I can turn off measure. And then we can talk about layers. So the layers are also over on the left, and we've got the sorting automatic. I leave it at that, but I also rearrange layers to my own heart's content sometimes. Um, I don't really mess with that at all, but you can adjust it if you want your layers to be auto sorted. New layer, of course, makes a new layer. And then we've got 3 layers here already. So what we've got starting at the top is the pen layer. And then we've got a pencil layer, and then we've got the grid. So I pretty much just ignore the grid. And it's that one's going to disappear if I turn off grid. So you can ignore the grid layer. But the pencil and the pen layer, Cooncepts will auto create a new layer every time you choose a new drawing tool. So if you were to draw with the watercolor brush, you're going to end up with a watercolor layer. If you draw with the marker brush, you're going to end up with a marker labeled layer. I don't pay attention to any of that. I will use these layers just because they're already layers, so why not? But I'm going to rename them. So this pencil layer, if you single tap on the name of the layer, it's going to open up these extra options. This last option, the square with the pencil in it, that's to rename your layer. So I'm going to rename this layer border. And my border layer is just going to be on the bottom. There's not going to be anything else on that layer. It's just a reference for me to know where the boundary of my image is going to be. So we're going to name that border. Done and done. Now we have border. Pen layer, I'm not sure what I'm going to call that yet. So I'm going to leave that one alone, but I will be renaming it at a later date. And I'm going to delete everything that's on these layers because we don't need it anymore. Except the border. I'm going to leave the border on the border layer. Okay, and then I'm also going to lock the border layer. So I single tapped on border once again, opened up these options. The selection is if you want to select everything on the layer, it's just like a quick select. This locks the layer, so it cannot be edited as long as it's locked. This duplicates the layer, or it might copy the layer to your clipboard. I don't use that one a whole lot. The trash can deletes the layer, of course, and then this renames the layer. And this that says 100%, that's opacity. So if you want your, like if you put a reference image down on its own layer and you want to see through it or see, see something through it, you can adjust the entire layer's opacity with this slider. But for right now, I'm just going to lock the border. And then I'm going to make a new layer. And if you want to reposition your layers, tap and hold, and you will be able to drag it to the new position. So the reason I made a new layer and then dragged it underneath the border layer is this is where I want my reference image to go. I'm going to put my reference image on its own layer. So we're going to tap rename, and we're going to call this reference. Reference. Okay, done. Good. Now, to import an image, let me direct your attention to the very top right of your screen. There's an export and an import. We want to import. You can pretty much ignore all these shapes unless there's a shape that you need for some reason. This top area right here, it has a little clip, a little paper clip on it. That's your clipboard. So if you have something that you copied from anywhere and you want to paste it into your Cooncepts file, that's where you go to paste. But I am interested in the more, and this is really small, but it's to the right of the import and it says more, and I'm going to tap there to go get a photo. So when you tap more, this is what you're going to see. I have my recently imported images, but I actually want to go to my photos. So if I go to photos, we're going to use this orchid picture as our example today. So I've imported it. All I had to do was tap on it. It imported. And now it's selected, so I can position it however I want, but I do want to turn off rotate. So I have some extra options that showed up at the bottom of my screen. I want to turn off rotate because I want to make this orchid picture bigger. I want it to be, I want it to fit in my 12 by 12 border. I don't want to tip it. I don't want to rotate it. So I've disabled rotate, and now I'm going to pinch and enlarge. And this orchid is going to be our demo drawing today. To stop editing, just tap off of the image anywhere. Okay, and I actually want to bump this orchid a little bit to the left because I didn't realize it was touching the border there. So watch, oh, actually, okay, I didn't think it was going to work though. I complained so much about not being able to pick up images with the lasso tool, and then of course it works on first try. Ah, story of my life. Okay, let's just move this a little bit to the side so that the edges of the flower were not touching the border. Good. And pinch, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And then to turn off the import menu, all you have to do is tap it again. And that closes all of that. All right, so we are ready to draw. We are ready to start tracing this orchid. One more thing before we dive into that. You guys have stuck with me so far through all the boring settings and tool analysis, but before I start drawing, I want to explain how I'm going to draw, as in my design theory. And to do that, we actually need to switch over to Adobe Illustrator. So we're jumping ahead a little bit. What you're looking at in Adobe Illustrator on your screen right now are some finished templates. These are templates that started out as drawings in Cooncepts and have been fully colored, and actually these particular templates are from about 4 years ago. They have been turned into finished quilts years ago at this point, but they work as a good example. So this is kind of the finished product. This is the finished version of where we're going after doing all of our editing in Illustrator. The reason I'm showing you this is because all of these lines started in Cooncepts, and I need to know how I plan to make the template, how I'm planning to do my design so that I can draw it from the beginning in Cooncepts. My rule of thumb for designing is that every object gets a color. So for example, each leaf is green. The petals are red. Okay? Makes sense. Each object gets a color. Each color is made up of three values and equivalently three fabrics. So we have a light, a midtone, and a dark, which equate to a highlight, a midtone, and a shadow. Each object gets a highlight, a midtone, and a shadow. So let's take this leaf. I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. So I have three values of green. I have a light green, a middle green, and a dark green that make up this leaf. If I take these light green sections and just move them to the side, the middle green is solid under where they used to be. The middle green extended entirely under the highlight fabric. But if I move the middle green, the dark is actually in two pieces. It does not extend completely under the light. So let me undo here and then select a dark. This pink line shows the outline of the dark image, the shadow object. And you can see it does not go all the way under as this one. It's just its little corner here. So I'm going to undo and put the light back on top. If I select this mid-tone green, the pink line shows its outline. You can see it goes completely under the light green. That's the basic core theory of how I design all of my quilts. One color per object, three values per color. And so each object ends up being made of at least three fabrics. That's important because we're getting ready to draw another flower, and it's going to be made up of white and pink, and each of the white and the pink need to be made up of three whites and three pinks. I need to know that up front. I need to plan that into my drawing. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to add all of those colors when we go to Illustrator because there will be lines missing. One more example on this trillium while we're here. If I take a look at this particular leaf, we've actually got four values here. I had an extra deep dark value of the red, but my lightest colors of red are here and they're on top. The mid-tone red goes all the way underneath, so you can see it's a solid shape there. And then there's this little mid-tone red over here. We've got our shadow red that is solidly extending under all of the mid-tone red. And then we've got this deep dark shadow, which is actually on top of the shadow red. Why is that? It's because it has to do with cast shadow. So I decided that I thought this shadow was being cast by the stamen, I think, flower anatomy. I didn't expect to have to dredge that out of my brain today. I think there's stamen, pestle maybe. Gosh, I don't know. That was middle school science class. It's been a long time. Anyway, this deep dark shadow is being cast on top of the shadow fabric. So I opted to put that on top. Normally, in almost all other situations, it's light on top of dark. So highlight goes on top of midtone, goes on top of shadow, goes on top of deep dark shadow. Cast shadows, they are an exception, but they are very much an exception and not the rule. The rule is lights on top of darks, at least for my own designs. So I just got done explaining I need at least three values per object, right? I need a highlight, a midtone, and shadow for each object. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, Kestrel, these yellow pieces in here, those are all one color. There's only one yellow. What's going on? Sometimes the breakdown, my theory breaks down at very small sizes. So this template for this red trillium is 8 by 10, 8 inches wide by 10 inches tall. It is, or actually, no, I'm looking at the top. It's 9 inches wide by 11 inches tall, 9 by 11. So it is not very big. Those yellow stamen, if they are actually stamen, I apologize to any flower aficionados out there. Those yellow pieces are already a fraction, like they're less than 1/4 of an inch wide. There's only so small I can cut my fabric. So, it is what it is. I was not able to make them multiple values. If this trillium were, 3 feet wide, it would have been a different story. I would have been able to add a lot more detail. As it is, they're one color. They're one fabric, one value. It is what it is. I couldn't, I can only cut my fabric so small or else it just won't stay together. But the 3 values per color, that's really important. And we're going to be drawing our orchid in Cooncepts today according to that rule of thumb. So let's switch back over to the iPad. All right, back to our orchid. So the anatomy of this orchid, right? We've got 5 white petals around the outside edge, and we've got this pink thing in the middle. I'm really good with my flower anatomy, can you tell? We've got this pink stuff going on in the middle, and we've got a little bit of yellow in here. The dots are not going to happen. The dots are going to be really, really, really small. So if I were doing this orchid as a real quilt, I would probably put these dots in with just a little bit of dabs of acrylic paint. So we're not going to be drawing the dots, but we're going to draw all the rest of the pink stuff. We're going to make this little piece in here. That little bit we're going to make yellow, and then of course we'll have our white petals. So let's get started. First of all, I need to make sure I'm drawing on the correct layer. I do not want to draw on my reference layer. The reference layer, I'm actually going to lock because I don't want to mess that up. I don't want anything to change about it. I'm going to go up to the pen layer, and I'm actually going to draw this orchid on 2 different layers. So the pink stuff is going to be on one layer, and then the 5 white petals I'm going to put on a second layer. So this one, we're going to start by drawing those white petals. So instead of having pen, I'm going to rename it to white petals because I'm all about the creative naming convention. White petals. Yay. Okay, we got white petals. I'm going to grab my pen and we're going to draw these white petals in blue. And I'm using blue mostly so I can see it. If I were drawing in white, I would not be able to see it very well. And I need to be able to see my my lines. So the color that I'm using for my pen has absolutely 0 bearing on what color the object is going to be. I need to be able to see my lines. So picking good colors, makes that easy. I'm using a 2-finger pinch to zoom and rotate. Normally when I'm drawing, it's just as a quick aside, when I'm drawing on my iPad normally, I have really bad posture. Like I'll lay on my back on the couch and draw with, the iPad above me and stuff. So I'm moving it all over the place. I constantly reposition the image so that it's most comfortable for my pencil, my pen hand. So we're going to be moving this image around a lot today. All right, so I'm just going to trace. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do this little thingy in the middle. I don't know what this thing's called, but we're going to do that. And then loop-de-loo. All right. And I'm going to draw as though those pink things aren't there. We're on our own layer. The white stuff is all going to be on its own layer. And so in order to have solid shapes that I can then fill in Illustrator, I'm just going to pretend this pink stuff isn't there and just draw under them because I'm going to need overlap anyway. I might as well start adding it to my drawing now. All right, so we've got that little thing in the center. And now we're going to go around. Okay, and you can see I have not done a perfect job of tracing for 2 reasons. One, I want my line to be smooth, and I actually have my smoothness set to 16, so the computer is compensating a little bit. The computer is helping to smooth my lines out a little bit. I want these edges to be clean. I don't really want as many bumps as exist in the actual photograph. So I'm okay with it being a little bit clean. Cleaner than the drawing. But the other thing is, I've got nudge tools. So I can grab a nudge tool and then come down here and poke that right back into shape. Yep. So you see how the nudge tool is really, really helpful. You don't have to worry about being super exact with your lines because you can just go and bump them right back into shape. Makes it nice, right? All right, we got that one. One done, four to go. So I'm going to guess here. I can't actually see how this petal connects to this part of the flower. So I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess it goes like that. And that might not be quite correct, but the number of people looking at this picture once it's in fabric and quilted and everything, it's going to be very few who catch that might not be totally completely accurate. Let me get my pen tool again, or my nudge tool. We're going to do some bumpage down here. That looks good. All right, let's do the other side. And now we're really going to swing this around so that it's comfortable for my drawing hand. Okay. Whoops. Okay, went off the page there. Let's erase some of that out. Get my slice tool. We're going to cut all that off. We'll stop there. Okay, so I'm going to need to dip down and then come back up, and boom, auto connect joins those two endpoints for me. That doesn't match quite. So what I'm looking at right now is this curvature of the petal on my right compared to this curvature that I just drew on the left. That the one on the left looks like too much. I think it needs to be brought up a little bit higher. So I've grabbed my nudge tool once again, and I'm going to grab the top of this line and just push it up a little bit. I'll push it up to there, and then I'm going to nudge this stuff into shape. Hey, that looks like it matches a little bit better. And to be honest, this is going to be under that pink stuff anyway, so it probably really doesn't matter because we're not going to see it, but it makes me feel better knowing that I tried to draw it so that it matched more accurately. Okay, let's draw this one that's down here, this petal. One, and then we'll come around like that, and I know it's going to scoop back up. I'm just going to do that because I see that it continues under this piece of the flower extending down, but I can't quite see where, so I'm just going to end it like that and call it good. Nudge tool, we're going to bump the tip a little bit more into shape. That looks good. Okay, and then I just have this line up at the top. There we go. So all of the outline of all of the white petals is now drawn. And if I turn off my reference photo by just tapping this little eyeball next to its layer, there's the outline of my orchid. We are not done with the white petals yet. Reason being, if we took this drawing as is into Adobe Illustrator, we could only add one color. Each petal would be a solid color, and when we cut them out of fabric and fuse them together, there's not going to be any definition. There's currently no indication of what has highlight, what has shadow, nothing. It's all the same. So we need to add those lines in now so that we can fill them in with color in Illustrator next month. So let's turn the reference photo back on. And here's where the artistic vision really comes into play. I have to decide what parts of these flowers are in highlight, midtone, and shadow. And then I have to draw it in. And to do this, because I have my outline in blue, I'm going to slightly adjust my blue. I'm going to draw with like this darker blue. So if I put a line down, you can see how it's darker. And that the dark line is an indicator to me when we go into Illustrator that I'm adding a variation of value to an object as opposed to another color. So if I was going to do a completely other color, I would start with like the pink or with green or something like that. I would make the line a different color as opposed to just a different value of the line. So if I'm drawing a line in a different value of the same color, that means in Illustrator, I need to fill it with a different value of the same color. Just that connection just makes sense in my head, makes it a little easier for me to understand what I was thinking when doing the original drawing. Okay, so I need to artistically decide what gets highlight, what gets shadow. I'm going to add, let's see, I think that will be highlight. And maybe just a little circle up here to be mid-tone. Did you see how that end joined from the auto join? Makes me happy. Okay, so we've got a highlight here, we've got mid-tone there, we've got mid-tone here. If I added a shadow, see, something else I'm thinking is I don't really want the same values of color to be next to each other. So if I'm going to add the darkest, the shadow color to this petal underneath, like let's say this petal, like that, this area in here is now the shadow color. I don't want shadow color to be on this petal up above, because then it'll be hard to see where the edge of the upper petal is, because it's going to be the same value as what's underneath it. Make sense? So I either need to decide, no, I'm sticking with 3 values of color right now, 3 values of white, or I need to add a 4th value. I need to add a 4th deep dark white. And I think for the purposes of this picture, I'm going to keep it simple because this is just a demonstration picture. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to keep it to 3. And I'm not going to add any dark color, any shadow color to this big petal. We've got the highlight, the number 1, and we've got the mid-tone, and it's just going to be a 2-value petal. That's it. So I did undo to get that scribble out of there. And then this petal underneath is going to be 2, also 2 values, but instead it's going to be the shadow in the mid-tone instead of the highlight in the mid-tone. So we've got the shadow down here, we've got mid-tone out here. This little bit of touching is the same because this area and this area are now both going to be the mid-tone colors. That ought to be okay. I think our eyes will auto-complete that little section, and I don't think it will visually be too hard to see that distinction. So we're going to leave that alone, and that probably means I should do the same over here. So let me think. Actually, this is a little bit more ripply. What should I do over here? Let's try. Yeah. All right, so if that's our highlight, and then we've got mid-tone here, down here, let's do that and that. Let me clean that up just a little bit. Okay, so do you see, I just did this. Do you see how autocomplete had auto-joined that one line that I just stretched over? And then these, so now all 3 of these endpoints are well past the light blue lines. So interestingly enough, in Illustrator, having lines that extend past their border is completely fine. That's not going to matter for us one bit when we go to add color to these shapes. But for my own personal preference of liking to keep things clean, I am going to use the slice tool just to bring back that. If it were print, I would call it overprint, but we're drawing, so overdrawing? It's not quite the same. Anyway, you get what I mean. I'm just going to trim this up a little bit, but still leave the lines, the darker lines, extending a little bit further out. And that will enable, we'll still be able to add color, but it's a little bit cleaner, and having lines that are ultimately, when we get much further down the process, having these lines that are a little bit longer isn't going to matter. The problem is gaps. So having too much line is far better than not enough line, if that makes sense. So in other words, we're good. Let's keep drawing. All right. Oops. And let's see, this little thing in the middle. I'm going to make this thing, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to make that the 3. And then Let's make that 1. So this is highlight, mid-tone, and then this thing will be shadow. And then up here, we've got one last white petal to draw. So let's go like that. And on, that wasn't quite right. Okay, these two sections I just drew are going to be the number 3. Those are going to be dark shadow. And let's see, this is going to be, oops, this is going to be highlight. I didn't get that quite right. See what I mean about spinning stuff around? All right, that's looking better. That's looking better. And then let me just drag this to connect it over here. All right, and slice off a little bit just for cleanliness sake. Okay, so our highlight, that's going to be really skinny. Let me pull this back in a little bit. Okay, so our highlight is this section here. That's going to be the lightest area. And then this is mid-tone. This is mid-tone. Good. And then in here, we've got our number 3 fabric, the shadow fabric. I just realized I'm doing it again. Oh yeah, there's the circle wheel. If I say the number 1, the number 2, number 3 fabric, that's how I number all of my own fabrics in my designs. So the number 1 fabric is always the lightest color for that color series, for that range. It's always the highlight. Number 2 is the next slightly darker fabric, the mid-tone. Number 3 is always the shadow, and then number 4 is the deep dark shadow. And I keep adding numbers for as many values as I have in that sequence. So like this quilt that's beside me, I have my my wave quilt here. I had 7 values of fabric in the wave. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you hear me saying, oh, this is the number 1, this is the number 2, that's what I'm talking about. It's the value of fabric with 1 always as the lightest. Okay, back to drawing. So we're now good with the whites. Whites are all done. We got to do this pink middle part. So as not to confuse myself, I'm actually going to click the eyeball on the white petals layer and then make a new layer. And we're going to name this one Pink Petals. You guessed it. I know they're not quite petals. I don't know the anatomy of an orchid. We're calling them pink petals, and that's just going to be the way it is. Okay, pink petals. Good. Done. Own it. Move on. Oh, and even more confusingly, there's going to be some yellow on this layer too. So we've got pink petals and yellow flower parts. Anyway, I turned off the white petals because I don't want to confuse myself when I'm drawing the pink stuff. And we're done with the white. We don't need the white anymore. So I turned it off. If you don't leave your layers turned off like that, don't leave the eyeballs off when we go to export the file because they won't be included in the file that you export. So any eyeballs that are turned off over here are not going to be in the file we export later on. So I'm going to keep it off now just to draw this pink section, but they're not going to remain off permanently. We're going to have to turn them back on. All right, got my drawing tool. I don't want to draw the pink stuff in pink because it's going to be hard to see. So we're going to switch to a nice green. Let's pick a nice green. There we go. That's a good one. And once again, I'm going to draw the outline of what I see here. So we've got these crazy things in the front. Let's do them first. These crazy things. All right, I'm having trouble seeing what's happening over here, but I think this one comes up like that. Okay. And then this sweeps out like that. Notice that I'm drawing on top of my own line there. We're going to remedy that or rather, we're going to use the slice tool to take some of that out. We've got this piece. And it goes like that. Whoop. Okay. We've got this piece that comes up like that, and then it kind of connects there, sort of. And it swoops out like that and comes down. Not quite like that. Let's do that one again. Okay, so we're just drawing the outline right now. And then we're, like we did with the white petals, we're going to go back in and add the highlight, midtone, and shadow. Think about this now. Okay, so I drew this piece. I drew that on the other layer, so I can pretend that it's not there and extend this object under it. Okay. Then we've got, let's see. Oops, I couldn't see what I was doing there. Let's try this again. We're gonna go like that. Okay. That's pretty good. Oh wait, then there's this thing. It's like I feel like I'm drawing a spaceship or something. Flowers are funny. Okay. So we've got the orchid mothership going on here. I'm going to, how big are these? Let's turn on measure and see how big this line is right there. 1/2 of an inch. That's getting small. That's getting a little bit small. I don't like to cut stuff that's smaller than 1/4 of an inch too often, because even though the Cricut will cut it, if I go to stitch it, it tends to start disintegrating if it gets too much smaller than that. So I think we can probably we can get 2 yellows in this middle section, and then we're gonna have to call it a day. That'll have to be it for the yellow. So I'm going to grab a, oops, lighter green. Let me grab a bright green. And we're going to, I'm going to make the inside of this yellow thing like a shadow. I know it doesn't quite look like that, but I think it's going to get weird. It's going to be hard to see what's going on if I mean, something has to be lighter and something has to be darker. So we're only going to have 2 values of fabric. I'm going to pretend that there's no highlight, and we're just going to have midtone and shadow for the yellow, because this whole area is in shadow anyway. So in here is going to be my shadow yellow. And then, actually I can turn off measure now. Up here is going to be the midtone yellow. And I'm going to add some more shadow yellow over here. All right, so we've got midtone yellow and midtone yellow. And this is going to be shadow yellow. And let's see what else. Let's draw the divider with the pink. So this is going to be the separator with the pink. Let me see if this is connected. Okay, so right, hang on, let me back up a step. Moving ahead of myself. Okay, this right here, this area that I've just covered in blue is not, they're not actually connecting. So do you see how the end of this line does not cross over the middle of the other line, the adjacent line? That's going to be a problem in Illustrator. That's a gap. That's bad. We do not want gaps. So all I'm going to do is grab my nudge tool and push this other line. Actually, I'm going to zoom out so I'm moving more of it, and then just bump it a little bit. And that's it. Now we're going to be good we won't have to mess with it when we get to Illustrator. Let's see what else we got here. We still need to do our pink separations. We're good on the yellow. Oh, these things are kind of yellow. I'm gonna make these things yellow because they're kind of a yellow already. All right, and then over here we've got some funky overlap. I'm gonna extend this yellow thing just so we don't end up with a tangent. Extend that a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to do some slicing. Let's get our slice tool. So we're going to slice this out. The yellow thingy is on top of the other flower parts. So we're slicing out to make this all one continuous shape now. We've sliced out that extra stuff. Alrighty, let's see what else we've got to do here. This is going to be in darkness. I'm going to make these things pink on the outside, but because this section here is facing up, it's catching the light from above, so it's going to be our highlight. And let's just draw it like that. And then down here, let's see, we've got some shadowy pink. Some shadowy pink. So we've got our highlight, our number 1, our number 2, and then our number 3 down there. All right, we've got number 1 pinks out here. All right, so that'll be a 1. We've got our 2s. Let's say the 2. Is kind of like that. So this and this will be our mid-tone pink. Actually, this line should come over. We're done like that. All right. And then we've got shadowy pink, dark pink. What else have we got? We need to do this one over here. Oh, let's close that up because that wasn't actually connected. This isn't connected. Okay. What color does this need to be? I have the yellow continuing over here. So I'm going to make this yellow actually, instead of with all the, if I want it, like I was saying earlier, if I want these pink shapes to be in here, these pink stretched out dots like this, if I want those to be in here, I'm probably going to have to add them with a little bit of dabs of acrylic paint because they're going to be far too fine for us to cut with fabric. So that's what's going to happen there. I'm going to make this yellow, and if we're going to do dabs of paint later, that, you know, that's not part of what we're drawing today. So let's actually, this is pretty light up there, so we can work in some light yellow too. This goes behind that, so we need a little bit of shadow. So we're going to do shadow there. We're going to do mid-tone there, and then we're going to do light pink here. Or I'm not pink, yellow. So we're going to have highlight yellow after all. It'll be right there. This will be mid-tone yellow, and then we've got our shadow yellow and shadow yellow. And that will be very good except for one thing, and that is this squiggly fabric piece needs to shift a little bit because I'm going to end up with a tangent otherwise. So let's just scooch it. That's okay. That'll do right there. And let me clean up my lines. Like that. And then slice out some stuff. Slice, 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 slice. Okay. Good. And just one more line, I think. Yeah, this curves under. So we're going to do a number 2 pink. Let's see, we've got dark coming up. No, it's not quite the right shape. Oh, I need my light. Okay, we're going to do that, and we're going to see how that looks in Illustrator. So we should be all drawn now. We should be all set for one floating orchid coming right up. We've got our blue lines, we've got our white petals and our pink petals. This thing is ready to export. We are ready to take this into Illustrator and start adding some color. If I realize later on that I've messed up something in my drawing, I can always come back and add more to it, or, export it again, make changes, whatever. But for now, we're at the point where I would normally say, okay, I need to see it in color. I need to see how it looks. Did I mess anything up? Do I need to make any extra adjustments? And to do all of that, we need to be in Illustrator. So to export a file, come up to the top right, going to tap on export, and it will bring up the export menu. We want an SVG. To go into Illustrator, we want an SVG. We want the entire drawing, and we want it to be transparent. Use filters must, emphasis, all caps, MUST, be turned off. We do not want to export filters. If you export an SVG with filters, it will crash your Adobe Illustrator. It will crash your Affinity Designer. Turn off the filters. So what are filters? Filters are the textures added to the brushes. Filters are why the pencil brush looks like a pencil, or the watercolor brush looks like watercolor. The pen tool does not have a filter. So it's another reason to draw with, I like drawing with the pen tool, because it's going to look more or less the same when we go to Illustrator. But Illustrator can't handle the filters. So the filters must be turned off. On, it has the black outline. Off, it has the gray outline. No filters. I can't emphasize the importance of that enough. No filters. So SVG, entire drawing, transparent, export, and it's going to ask you what you want to do with it. I typically just airdrop to my own computer. If you have iCloud hooked up, or Dropbox, but whatever way you want to get your file out of Cooncepts into your computer, go for it. AirDrop works the best for me. And sending, almost done. There we go. Okay, and now we're back to the drawing. So this file that you're looking at right now is the file that I am going to provide for download, and you will be able to open it up, see all of these layers we just created today. You'll see my tool wheel with all of my preferred tools up there. You're going to see all of my lines. You'll be able to go in, mess with them, do whatever. This is it. This is what you see is what you're going to get if you go in and download this file. That is everything you need to know about drawing in Cooncepts for quilt design in a nutshell. Thanks for sticking with me this long. I know it's a long video. On the recording, we're up to almost an hour and a half. It won't be quite that long in the video. I'll trim some out, but there is a lot. We went over a ton of information today. As I said at the beginning of the video, this is the first lesson in a 6-part series. Next month in June, we're going to be taking the drawing that we did today and turning it into a full color template in Adobe Illustrator. If you're interested in seeing that video or watching the live stream that's going to happen next weekend, May 22nd, where I will be drawing another template for one of my own quilt designs. There won't be nearly as much instruction as you saw today. We're going to just be doing it live. We're going to be moving very quickly and covering a lot more ground than what we saw today, but it'll be a live stream, and you can, ask me questions or whatever, and we'll have a conversation while I'm doing that, while I'm drawing. If you're interested in either of those things, please consider becoming a patron. Here's the URL, patreon.com/KestrelShow. Your support means that I can continue making content like this. So if you enjoyed today's content, please think about it. That would really help me out. Okay, questions, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.